evil seed of what you've done germinates within you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your friendly neighborhood Reptile here, back again. I'm going to be doing something that I've always wanted to do for a long time. I'm going to be doing a movie review where basically I just talk about movies that I've seen. I'm primarily mostly going to do Disney films because I'm a huge fan of Disney and all that stuff, and they've never been represented on this channel, and I feel like I should do that in some sense and everything, because a lot of people already know I'm a huge Disney fanatic. I love a lot of their films. They're stylish, they're classic, they tell great stories, and they have amazing themes as well, and lovable characters. They have everything. Not to mention, they also own Marvel, and they own Star Wars and everything. They're practically at the top of the movie industry and everything. This kind of developed a bad reputation for them, but I personally still have a lot of respect for them, even if they do make a few business decisions that I may not be a big fan of. But to start off this review, I'm going to talk about Peter Pan. Peter Pan was a film that I saw as a child, so it's pretty nostalgic to me. Even though the film came out in 1953, I'm sure tons of people who grew up in my generation have seen this film at least once growing up. Now that I've watched both Peter Pan and Return to Neverland back to back and are fresh in my mind, I figured I would take you back and talk about them. First, let's talk about Peter Pan, released in 1953. The story revolves around Wendy Darling and her last night in the nursery with her little brothers John and Michael. Peter Pan, voiced by Bobby Driscoll, searches for his shadow at Wendy's house. Eager to help Peter, he proceeds to take Wendy and her brothers with him to Neverland. This is where we see them going on wild adventures in a magical realm filled with mermaids, Indian braves, and a pirate crew led by the dreadful Captain Hook, voiced by Hans Conried. Regarding Peter Pan's character, for those who don't know, he's a boy who never grows, so his childhood is eternal. He's best friends with a hot-headed pixie named Tinkerbell, who is modeled after actress Margaret Carey. What's cool about her character is that she's strictly silent, always using body and sign language as a form of communication. Tinkerbell, who is jealous of Wendy, persuades the Lost Boys that Peter told them to shoot down Wendy. Eventually, her treachery is discovered by Peter, who banishes her from Neverland. John and Michael set off with the Lost Boys to find the Indians, but instead they are captured by them, believing that the boys were responsible for the kidnapping of the main chief's daughter, Tiger Lily. Peter and Wendy rescue Tiger Lily from Hook and Mr. Smee and return her to her tribe. Hook also takes advantage of Tinkerbell's jealousy over Wendy by tricking her into revealing Peter Pan's hideout. Wendy and her brother grow homesick and wish to return back to London with the Lost Boys, but Peter doesn't want to grow up and refuses. The pirate crew surrounds Peter's home and delivers a time bomb to him in an attempt to kill him, which ultimately fails thanks to Tinkerbell. Peter rescues Tinkerbell from the rubble, and together they confront the pirates and defeat Captain Hook. They sail off in the Jolly Roger back to London, with Wendy telling her parents about her adventures. Her father, George, who originally wanted Wendy out of the nursery, lightens up and lets Wendy stay, stating that the ship that he sees in the clouds reminds him of his childhood. Even though the film is a much lighthearted version of the novel by J.M. Barrie, after all, the film is based on it. It is a timeless classic by Disney. The animation for 1953 is breathtaking, and it has some pretty ambitious visuals for the time as well. It's one of my favorite films from them, teaching the theme of faith and trust. Almost 50 years after the original, in 2002, a sequel would be released, Return to Neverland. This film revolves around Wendy, now a fully grown woman, having a family of her own, her husband Edward, her son Daniel, and her daughter Jane, the main protagonist. Edward is sent to fight in World War II, leaving Wendy to take care of the kids. Jane, compared to her mother's personality in the first movie and her brother Daniel, is a very very serious young girl, and doesn't believe in any stories about Peter Pan. In my opinion, it kind of shows the depressing tones and the dehumanization of the war war and how it's affecting Jane on a mental level. This shows when she gets into an argument with her mother and Daniel. Wendy is informed that her children are to be evacuated to the countryside for safekeeping during the war, but Jane refuses to go, not wanting to leave her mother behind. Later that night, Captain Hook kidnaps her, mistaking her for Wendy, and takes her to Neverland. Hook wants her as bait to lure Peter Pan into a trap, but Peter rescues her and discovers that she is actually Wendy's daughter, Jane. He takes her to his hideout to meet the Lost Boys, and together they try to teach Jane how to fly so she can get home, but she refuses and says that she doesn't believe in fairies, causing Tinkerbell to get sick. Captain Hook finds Jane and lies to her that he won't harm Peter Pan in exchange for the treasure stolen by the Lost Boys. He gives her a whistle to blow as a signal for when she does find the treasure. She then reunites with Peter and the boys to play a game of treasure hunt, which leads to her finding the treasure. After she forms a great relationship with them, she refuses to blow the whistle and discards it. Peter then proclaims Jane to be the very first lost girl, which FYI her little brother Daniel foreshadowed earlier on in the film. One of the Lost Boys, Toodles, blows the whistle, and the pirates arrive and capture Peter, where he discovers that Jane cooperated with Captain Hook. Peter becomes upset at her for her treachery and tells her that her disbelief in fairies is basically going to cause Tinkerbell to die. Horrified with this information, Jane hurries to find Tinkerbell's body and becomes distraught, thinking she's dead, but her new belief resurrects Tinkerbell, and the two of them confront the pirates and rescue Peter Pan and the Lost Boys. Peter uses an anchor to sink the ship and escorts Jane back to London. During the ending to the film, Peter and Tinkerbell meet Wendy again, but Peter is saddened to see that she's an adult, but Wendy assures him that she's still the same person. Also, you can see Tinkerbell finally got over her jealousy of Wendy. It's a great nostalgic moment that does pay homage to the original. I really like this moment. After they say goodbye, Edward returns from the war, and Peter and Tinkerbell fly back to Neverland. I think everyone, including me, will agree it's not as good as the first. It basically repeats what happened in the first film, and it's a lot more bleak compared to the first. The idea of a female character working with Captain Hook, only to be tricked, was the same as the first film. The only difference is that instead of Tinkerbell, it's Jane. Both characters also demand Hook to not harm Peter Pan. And should it be any coincidence that when they did cooperate with Hook that it had a lot to do with their differences with Peter Pan? The Lost Boys getting kidnapped was basically the same as the first film, but instead of Peter saving the day, it's Jane and Tinkerbell. So the movie is repeating what was already accomplished in the first film, and the musical scores weren't memorable either. There's also no mention of the Indian characters from the first film, and this is mostly due to controversies surrounding the portrayal of Indians in the film, so to avoid this, they completely wrote them out of the sequel, which is understandable. That being said, I don't think it's a bad movie like most people think. It has its flaws and repeats the story, it's very repetitive, but I think it's the most watchable Disney sequel next to Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, in comparison to other sequels, like The Hunchback of Notre Dame 2. Now that was a bad movie. The animation in this movie is still pretty good, something you should expect with most Disney films. Keep in mind, I said most. Anyway, it's a film that I don't recommend as much as the first film, but for the hardcore fans, this film will give you a decent feeling. Not as good as the first, but I like it in its own way. So that being said, I'm going to get out of here. This is your friendly neighborhood reptile signing off, and I will be back with more reviews.